Hey, what's up everybody, Rich Gaming Guy here. Today I'm going to show you guys how to set up and map your GameCube style controllers in Batocera. And the cool thing about this is you'll be able to use this particular controller in other collections as well. So you could play it for Dreamcast, you could play it for N64, you can play it for PlayStation, Super Nintendo, Genesis, all that good stuff. So you can use it beyond just the GameCube games in Batocera. So let's dive into it. I'll show you exactly what you need to do to get this up and running. Alright, so here we are booted up into Batocera. So if you're using a Bluetooth style GameCube controller like I am today, then you're going to want to obviously pair your GameCube controller first through Bluetooth settings. So if you aren't sure how to do that, you're going to first open up your main menu here if you're using a keyboard, which we're going to need to use anyways later on. Go ahead and hit your space bar. That's going to open up your main menu. If you're using a regular gamepad controller, not this particular one right here, something that's already been mapped and pre-configured, then you're going to want to just hit your start button and open up this main menu. We're going to navigate down to controller settings. We'll select it with enter on the keyboard. Just use A or X on your controller to confirm that if you're using a pre-configured gamepad controller. So from here we're going to go down to the second option, which says pair Bluetooth controller. I've actually already paired this. You can see the little LED indicator light there is lit up. You're going to see that it's going to scan in the top right corner through your Bluetooth, and it's going to pick up the signal from your controller. So go ahead and hit your pairing button on your controller. It's going to populate it in the top right corner. Once everything syncs up and connects, it's going to give you a confirmation notice up there in the top right corner where it currently says scanning Bluetooth. So again, this has already been set up for me, so I can back out of this. It's going to actually time out up there in the top right corner. But once it tells you that everything has been confirmed and the connection on here has been made, you're going to get bumped back out here to your controller settings. So it should look like this once it confirms in the top right corner. Once it does, we're going to select the top option which says configure a controller. So we'll go ahead and hit enter. You're going to get this little notice here. Go ahead and confirm it by selecting OK. And here you can see it says one gamepad detected, and that is this right here. Again, LED indicator light is on there and lit up. So hit any button on this particular controller and you're going to notice a name populate into the bottom of this rectangle here, and it'll immediately bring you into your configuring page. So I'm going to hold down my A button here. It says gamepad there, and try to pay attention to what it labels your controller as. In this case for me it just said gamepad. It may give you a customized name. Just remember what it is, and you're going to use that later on. So in here you're going to see on screen we have a bunch of our functions that we need to map to this particular controller, and it's going to get a little bit funky here because this is not your typical gamepad controller setup. That's one of the things with Nintendo. Their controllers are usually very specific to their games and game collections. So Batocera by default uses an Xbox 360 or PlayStation style controller setup where you have dual analog sticks, one D-pad, an A, B, X, Y sort of setup, two trigger buttons, two shoulder buttons, and you also have the functionality of the buttons within your analog sticks. So that's your typical setup on here, so this definitely differs from that. So we're not going to go off of how these are labeled on here. You can see we have A, B, X, and Y on here. We're not going to use that and match that up with the functions that you're going to see on the Batocera screen here. So we'll kick this off nice and easy. For D-pad up, down, left, and right, we're going to do exactly that here on our D-pad. So for D-pad up, we'll hit D-pad up. For down, we'll go down. For left, we'll go left, and right, we'll go right. So now start. If you have a regular GameCube controller here, this one that I have has a bunch of different buttons in here. Kind of has the same layout of a Switch controller. So if you have just one start button in the center, go ahead and hit that. For me, I'm going to use the plus button over here in the top right corner. So now select. On a regular GameCube controller, you don't have a select function. So you're going to actually skip this if you have a regular GameCube controller. If you have something like I have here with some extra buttons here, go ahead and assign one of those extra buttons as select. So I'm going to use the minus on mine as select. Again, if you don't have that, you'll skip this, and to skip it, just hit your start button and hold it down. It'll skip you right over the select function option. So next we have A, and most people will go ahead and hit the A button on here. That's not going to work properly when you're navigating through your menus on here, or if you're going through and you're going to use this controller to play other collections other than GameCube. So for the A function, we're going to hit X over here. It's this button right here. For the B button on the screen, we're going to hit our big green A button on our GameCube controller. For X on screen, we're going to hit our red B button on the GameCube controller. And for Y, this will be the easy one, we're going to hit Y on our GameCube controller. So that's the only one that actually lines up with the labeling properly. So now for left analog up and left, we're going to go over here to our left analog. For up, we'll push it up. And be careful with these, don't go super quick because there's obviously a bunch of different little ridges here that you can easily kind of go off with. You want to make sure that it's perfectly straight up motion. Same thing with left analog left. We're going to go perfectly over to the left. And now for right analog up and left, we're going to use our C stick over here. So we're going to go right analog up, push that C stick right up here, directly straight. And then for right analog left, we'll push it directly to the left. Now for L1, this is where it starts to get a little bit complicated. On my controller here, you can see I have actually two shoulder buttons here. So I don't have just one Z button, I have two of them. And in GameCube games, they're actually going to populate in the exact same way. They're going to have the same function. In other collections, though, if we were going to play this on like a PlayStation style game, they would work as the shoulder buttons on there. So it would be the same as L1 and L2, or L1 and R1 rather. So what we're going to do here is, if you have two like me, you're going to do this as L1 as this one right here, and R1 as this one right here. If you only have one of these, you're going to bypass L1 and just hold down like the A button. Any button you've already assigned a function to, just hold it down, you're going to bypass that. For R1, you'll hit your Z button, is what it would be labeled as if you have a true GameCube controller. Again, mine has the 2, so it's a little bit different. So now for L2 and R2, those are going to be your trigger buttons back here. So for L2, we're going to pull our left trigger. For R2, we're going to pull our right trigger. And now for L3 and R3, that would be the button functionality to your analog sticks on your standard controller. We don't have those functions here, so we're going to bypass them. We're going to hold down that A button, bypass the first one, bypass the second one. Now we're down to hotkey. So this is another thing that gets a little bit tricky. Here I have extra buttons on here. So if you have extra buttons and you assign something to your select function, go ahead and hit that select function. For me, I use the minus button on mine, so I'm going to do the same thing there. And what that means is my hotkey function, which will exit me from games, bring me back to my collection menu, you're going to hit that with start at the same time if you're in a game, and that's going to exit you from the game. Now, if you have a GameCube controller without those extra buttons like I have here, you're going to assign that function of the hotkey to your D-pad left. And that just means that D-pad left and start together are going to exit you from your games. And that's a combination of buttons you'll never use in any GameCube game, so there's no risk of accidentally exiting games because you hit that combination of buttons in one of your GameCube games. There's no risk of that whatsoever, so that's your safest option in terms of assigning a hotkey function to a regular original GameCube style controller. So again, I assigned it to minus because I have that functionality here on this controller with those extra buttons. So go ahead, if you don't have a controller like me, and assign hotkey as D-pad left. Now you're going to see that we're highlighting the OK button down there. Now go ahead and hit your A button. That's going to save everything. You should advance back into your controller settings just like this. And now if you want to see how this functions, go up and down with your analog stick, go up and down with your D-pad, and you can see everything seems to be working on here perfectly. So now in order to exit this, we'll go ahead and hit our X button. X within our menus is always going to be our back button. A is going to be our selecting button. So if we wanted to jump, we'll back out of this. If we want to go into a collection, let's say we want to drop into, let's go to our Nintendo GameCube collection. If we want to jump in here and check out what we have going on, we'll go ahead and select it with our A button. It brings us right into our GameCube collection. We can scroll through, and we're able to run through all of our menu options on here perfectly with these mapping settings. So we'll back out with X. And if we were to jump into any collection other than GameCube right now, everything's going to work perfectly. GameCube's going to be funky, but everything else is going to work just like this was a Xbox 360 or PlayStation style controller. Obviously it's going to be a little bit funny because these buttons here are in a weird sort of place. Our C stick makes for kind of a weird analog stick, but all in all, we'll be able to play a bunch of different games for a bunch of different collections with the mapping that we're doing right now. But we want to set this up for Nintendo GameCube. So what we need to do now is we need to set this aside for a minute. We're going to make sure that we've connected our keyboard as well as a mouse. This is a USB receiver mouse, so I have that plugged in. This is wired in, you can see up there, right into my PC. We're going to go up here to F1 on our keyboard. Make sure you're in a, you're not inside an actual collection. You can see here, I'm scrolling through all of my different collections, so I'm not within a specific collection. Go ahead and hit F1. That's going to bring us right into our file browser. So we're going to take now our mouse and we're going to go over here to the left column and we're going to select applications. One click will do it. Now go over to your Dolphin Emulator. Double click on that. And now everything should load in for you. I was actually in this earlier, so all my titles are already loaded in, but you're probably seeing all of your titles load in here. Should take just a couple of seconds depending on how many titles you have. We're going to go up here to where it says controllers. We're going to click the controllers tab. And you're going to get this little list of controllers here. We're going to go with port 1, standard controller, and we're going to hit configure. So now you need to go under device. This may populate in incorrectly. Go to your device list and make sure that you're selecting the controller that you just mapped and set up here. So that's when I said when we got that initial rectangle and we hit our A button and we saw a little flash of the title of this, you're going to want to find that title. So here you can see I actually have some, let me see what we have here. We've got USB keyboard, so that's picking up the keyboard there. We've got, looks like receiver right here. That's, I believe this, one of these is actually my mouse here. So just make sure that you select your gamepad controller and make sure that it matches up to this one. If you're using a regular gamepad controller for the previous setup process here, you may have two listed on this list. Make sure you're selecting the one that is the GameCube one. Otherwise, you're going to map the wrong controller. So for me, we saw that mine was labeled gamepad, so it's really simple. Make sure you select that. And now we need to map this, but luckily here, there's no real tricks to this. Everything is going to be exactly as they're labeled on your GameCube controller. So for A, we'll click the function next to it and we'll hit A. It'll populate in as east for me. It may populate it in differently for you depending on what you have for a controller here. Now we'll go to B, we'll hit B. Go to X, hit X. Go to Y, hit Y. Now Z, if you have a controller like me, you could assign it to either one. I'm going to keep it true to the original GameCube controller and go with the right option here. And you can see I've actually already set up this column previously, so nothing's actually changing. Yours is likely going to change because the stock settings on here on screen are always wrong. So now we'll go down to start. For me, I did the plus button here. For hotkey, if you're using, again, a regular GameCube controller and you don't have these extra functions here, hit your D-pad left button. I have the extra functions available, so I'm going to hit my minus button there. Now we're going to go down to D-pad. Real self-explanatory here. Up is going to be up on the D-pad. Down is going to be down. Left is going to be left. Right is going to be right. Alright, so now we're going to move over to calibrating the control stick. So you can see here under our control stick it says calibrate. Oftentimes you can leave this alone, but I do recommend just going in and just confirm that it works by calibrating it. And you're just going to click calibrate. Now, full warning here, sometimes this for some reason causes a glitch in Batocera, and it sometimes will freeze this page. Hopefully it doesn't do that today for me. If it does, you're going to have to just power down your PC, reboot, and luckily everything that we've done so far is going to save on here, so you will not have to go back and redo anything that you've already mapped and configured on here. So we're going to just hit calibrate, and now we're just going to move this function around just like that. So here it didn't give me any problems. So here you can see moving it around like that. It tracks perfectly on there. So we'll just hit finish calibration. And you can see we get this circle on here. So this is how it populates in originally. You can leave it the majority of the time, but it certainly doesn't hurt to just calibrate it. And it will automatically populate in all of these functions here. So now we can just skip all of these and we'll go over to the C stick. Same deal, we'll hit calibrate and we're going to move that C-stick around just like that. Once you make a full rotation, you see that the option to finish calibration populates in. We'll go ahead and click finish calibration, and it populates in just like that. So now we can avoid everything under C-stick. It's going to pull the calibration and populate in everything perfectly. So now we're going to go over to our triggers. All right, so the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to go over here to under triggers, and we're going to click on L. Click on it like that. We'll pull our left trigger. Same thing with right. Mine were actually already programmed in, but I'm going to go ahead and do it again. That is all we need to do down here in terms of mapping. Now we've gone through the entire controller, so we're going to go up here to profile. We're going to type on this line here, and we're just going to name this controller. So I'm just going to type in GameCube, just like that, and now we're going to go ahead and click save right here. All right, so once we've saved that here, we can close this out. We'll go in and we'll close out another one here. And then let's go into one of these games here. So here's our game list. Make sure you're going into a GameCube game though, of course. So let's find Double Dash, because that's probably what I'll use to test out this controller. So let me locate that. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight it, we're going to right click on it, and we're going to click Properties. Now we're going to go into our editor right here. And you can see we have a bunch of presets loaded in here, but we're going to go down under User Config, which is located right here, and we're going to click on this box. Now we're going to grab our keyboard, and we're going to type in the following. We're going to type in brackets, controls. We're going to bring it down to a new line, and we're going to type in PAD TYPE, so pad type 0 space equals space 6. Now we're going to hit enter, create a new line, and we're going to type in PAD PROFILE, and that's pad profile. We're going to do a number 1. We're going to do space equals space, and now we're going to type in the title of what we assigned our controls to there in the previous step. So I put GameCube. Make sure that you copy it correctly so it is exactly the same way, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit close now. Now you are going to have to do this for each of these games, at least in this version of Batocera. Now we can actually open that back up, and I should have just copied that. So let's go back into editor. We can just highlight this entire thing, right click it, and hit copy. All right, so now that we copied this, we can go ahead and close this out, and let's say we want to go into another game. Let's find another one to dive into. Let me go into NFL Blitz 2003. It's another one of my favorite games on here. So NFL Blitz 2003, we'll go ahead and right click, hit properties. We'll go into our editor again, and we'll drop down here to presets, and we'll just simply paste that in. So it's exactly the same way. Now, if you had multiple controllers and you went in here and you had multiples configured into here, you can go ahead and add additional ones. Very simply, you would just change this to pad type 0, leave everything else the same way, and then you go down here and you'd create another one called pad profile 2 instead of 1, and you would just list those. So you would just go down the line. If you had 3 controllers, you'd do pad type 2, pad profile 3, and continue on. Everything else though would be the same. 6 would stay the same, GameCube would stay the same, and when you're done, just go ahead and hit close. So we can now exit out of here. We can jump into games right from this list and everything will work perfectly, or we can exit back out to Batocera and test it out over there, which I think is what we're going to do here. All right, guys, you saw exactly what it takes to get our GameCube controller up and running in GameCube on Batocera. But the cool thing is we can also use this in those other collections, and the setup process isn't too difficult for those other collections. GameCube on the Dolphin Emulator takes a little bit of time to go game by game. I do believe they're changing that, though, with the latest version of Batocera. So if you're going to be switching over to the latest version, then you probably can go about doing this once and setting it for all your games rather than going into each game and having to copy and paste as I showed you in this video. So once I update on my end and I go to that newer version, if it's different than this process here, I'll also do a video for the latest version as well. So that's going to do it for today, though. If you guys enjoyed this video and you found this helpful, feel free to leave a thumbs up on the video. It's a huge help here on YouTube. And of course, hit that subscribe button to stay in the loop for all future videos here on the Retro Gaming Guy YouTube channel. Also, check me out online, www.retrogamingguy.com. That's going to do it for today, though. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you on the next video.